Hey, what's shaking, everyone? So, yesterday afternoon, President Trump released this memo that you might have heard about, and it looks like he's had enough of these do-nothing Democrats in charge of these cities and states that are either actively or passively supporting doing nothing about the violence and riots in the different cities and states across the nation. So, he's gonna start hitting them where it hurts, right in the wallet, taking a look at these lawless cities' federal funding and perhaps using their own tactics of redistribution and defunding against them. You know, for a guy who gets constantly derided as being incompetent, bumbling, unfit for office, he sure has a way of looking at things systematically, taking the appropriate steps, and really pissing these motherfuckers off. So instead of going blow for blow with what the New York Post has here, I've actually got the memo itself pulled up. So we'll skip over the intro here, and we'll just go straight into the policy. It is a policy and purpose of the United States government to protect the lives and property of all people in the United States from unlawful acts of violence and destruction. Without law and order, democracy cannot function. Americans cannot exercise their rights, including their right to peaceful expression, assembly, and protest. Property is destroyed, and innocent citizens are injured or killed. 100% right. He's at the same time defending people's God-given rights by the Constitution and decrying the violence that is clearly happening in a bunch of these shitty cities. Unfortunately, anarchy has recently beset some of our states and cities. Absolutely true. For the past few months, several states and local governments have contributed to the violence and destruction in their jurisdictions by failing to enforce the law, disempowering and significantly defunding their police departments, and refusing to accept offers of federal law enforcement assistance. As a result, these state and local government policies, persistent and outrageous acts of violence and destruction have continued unabated in many of America's cities, such as Portland, Seattle, and New York. Throw in Minneapolis, who has voted and is already taking steps to abolish their police department, not just defund. They're getting rid of it and restructuring it around some sort of fucking goofy community outreach program. It's bananas. Please look into it if you're interested. So this next paragraph here highlights everybody's favorite LARPing exercise that was the Chaz, the Chop, Cal Anderson Park that was taken over, and Mayor Jenny Durkin of Seattle referred to as a spot where the summer of love could happen. Meanwhile, 4 people were shot and 2 of those people were killed in Portland. Well, I've already extensively covered this in 3 previous episodes, so there's no point in running over that. Just something I wanted to highlight. To date, at least 140 officers have been injured in Portland. For much of this period, state and local officials in Portland have taken insufficient steps to protect the federal courthouse and initially rejected offers of federal law enforcement assistance. It's never inappropriate to kick Ted Wheeler, so I had to read at least one statement on his terrible policies. And this is the crux of everything. Likewise, in New York City, city officials have allowed violence to spike. In late May and early June, state and local officials allowed looting to take place for over a week, resulting in damage of an estimated 450 businesses. As of August 16th, there have been 896 shootings in New York this year, compared to 942 shootings during the same period last year. That is bananas. The shooting victims included children as young as 1 year old. Shootings have been rising in recent weeks, and police reported 244 shootings last month compared to 88 in July of 2019. A 177% increase. Let that sink in for a moment. While violence has surged, arrests have plummeted. In a 28-day period during the month of June and July, arrests were down 62%. Oh, that should be a good thing. From the same period in 2019. Amidst the rising violence, Mayor Bill de Blasio and New York City Council agreed to cut $1 billion from the New York Police Department budget. Well, why would you do that? Look at all of those other numbers that are consistently going up. But to be fair, arrests are down, including the canceling of hiring 1,163 officers. Oh, that's probably because they don't have enough officers out on the street to make the proper arrests. My bad. In June, Police Commissioner Dermot Shea disbanded the New York Police Department's plainclothes anti-crime units, which those are very useful, which target illegal guns and violent crime. Should just let the president finish. Police officials have cited this decision as a factor contributing to the rise in violence, obviously. In light of this unconscionable rise in violence, I have offered to provide federal law enforcement assistance, but both Mayor de Blasio, and Governor Andrew Cuomo, have rejected my offer. One final paragraph on the policy here. These are not the only cities that have recently decided to pursue reckless policies that allow crime and lawlessness to multiply. For example, Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser allowed rioters and anarchists to engage in violence and destruction in late May and early June, requiring me, the president, to call in the National Guard to maintain law and order in the nation's capital. This memo has clearly been in the works for a while, so forgive the president for not including this situation where Rand Paul, leaving the RNC, was viciously attacked by a bunch of BLM protesters, and things understandably could have been a lot worse without the actions of the police. At this altercation with these brainlets, they were yelling at Rand Paul to say her name, in reference to Breonna Taylor, of course, killed in a no-knock warrant because she lived with a suspected drug dealer and was also in on some of the crimes, but we'll quickly look past that. What's ironic about trying to make Rand Paul say her name is the fact that Rand Paul is actually sponsoring a bill to stop no-knock warrants, and the bill is named after Breonna Taylor. Just in case you were thinking there were any smart BLM protesters out there, you can go ahead and throw that assumption out the window. Back to the memo. Oh, quickly, the rest of this is just a couple of formalities. What he's actually doing with this isn't a claim that tomorrow all of the funds are going to start disappearing from these cities. Rather, this is a declaration of intent to review how much the cities are getting from the federal government as well as where it's going, like it says here. To advance the policy set forth in Section 1 of this memorandum, within 14 days of this date of this memorandum, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget shall issue guidance to the heads of executive departments and agencies for each agency to submit a report to the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, detailing all federal funds provided to Seattle, Portland, New York, Washington, D.C., or any components or instrumentalities of the foregoing jurisdictions. So the rest of this memorandum reads as clerical work. They have 60 days to review all of the reports submitted from the different municipalities and compare and contrast their different law enforcement styles, lack thereof, and definitely in the case of Portland, and determine whether or not they are eligible for subsidized lawlessness. Let's make this clear that this is not a declaration of removing federal funds from New York, Portland, Chicago, all the aforementioned cities. This is merely a declaration of intent to establish a board of the President's Office, the Attorney General, DHS, and OMB to review federal funding issued to these different lawless municipalities. But obviously for cities and states doing their job, this shouldn't be any problem. This should just be something that shouldn't send all these Democrats into a tizzy now, should it? Of course not. Governor Cuomo. Trump better have an army to protect him if he comes to New York City. Leave it up to old Sonny Cuomo here to get all hyperbolic. Trump's over here trying to take it to the mattresses. I want an all-out war. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo on Wednesday all but threatened President Trump's safety if he returns to New York City in a rant responding to an exclusive story by the Post that Trump is looking to pull federal funds from lawless cities, including New York. Cuomo called an emergency press briefing within a half an hour of Wednesday night to tear into Trump for the order, which cites New York City's rising murder rate and defunding of the New York Police Department, which we read. He'd better have an army if he thinks he's going to walk down the streets in New York. New Yorkers don't want to have anything to do with him, the Democrat said, all but threatening the commander-in-chief. No, that's a threat, and a pretty terribly worded threat considering the president is the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces. Fucking moron. Cuomo, who, like Trump, hails from Queens, wasn't done. He can't have enough bodyguards to walk through New York City. That is not a veiled threat. That is not an implied threat. That's a threat. People don't want to have anything to do with him. I love how his face is just perched there in the bottom of the screen. Those are enough death threats from Cuomo for one day, so what about Andy's Fredo to his Sonny? What about Bill de Blasio? What does this useless old muppet have to say? New York plans to sue Trump administration if it withholds federal funds from New York City. This jackass threatens to sue more people than Saul Rosenberg. Oh, my shoes, they fell off. My feelings were hurt. Let's see what Numbnuts has to say. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and state officials on Thursday threatened to sue Trump administration if he moves forward with plans to cut federal funding from a number of Democrat-run cities. President Trump sent a memo Wednesday to Russell Voigt, the acting director of Office of Management and Budget, and Attorney General Bill Barr that directs them to review and cut federal funds to lawless cities, including Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, New York, and Washington, D.C. De Blasio criticized the Trump administration's response and admonished the president for threatening to withhold funds as local officials respond to the ongoing pandemic. Yeah, it's always a problem. Look at this fucking bag of shit. I just realized this. Yeah, he's got little counters next to his name. He should also have one for his approval rating, but I digress. Let's get back to the story. You failed us, and now you want to punish us. Oh my God. If you persist in trying to deny the funding that's keeping New York City going in the middle of a crisis, we will see you in court, and once again, we will beat you in court. How about just do your job, you fucking dunce? The rest of this just reads as a pity party, so I won't bore you with the rest of it. The only other article of note from this story is that de Blasio, Ted Wheeler, Jenny Durkin, and Bowser all issued a joint statement saying that they aren't President Trump's political pawns and that this is merely a political stunt. Yeah, leave it up to this cabal of ineptitude to figure out what is and is not illegal, like they fucking know. Literally, the point of Trump pulling the federal funding is he realizes he has a smackhead daughter, and he left for the weekend. She held a rager at the place, sold all the furniture to buy some more dope. Then the kid has a spurg out and calls you a fascist because you aren't going to give her allowance for the next month and a half. The fucking bitch is 35. Get a grip. But I want you to cast your minds back to what Cuomo had to say, that nobody in New York City likes Trump. They don't want him around. They don't want anything to do with him. And I'm sure that's probably the popular consensus among Cuomo and his friends, but Trump's not even the most unlike elected official within New York City. That would be Bill de Blasio, of course. Trump has higher favorability than Bill de Blasio in New York poll finds. Well, color me shocked. Voters aren't too fond of Bill de Blasio as mayor or as a presidential candidate, according to two polls released Tuesday. Ooh, look at that. A poll conducted by Siena College found the mayor is less popular with New York voters than President Donald Trump. De Blasio received a 26% favorability rating and 57% unfavorability, compared to Trump's 35 and 62 split. The poll was conducted between July 28th and August 1st. And included responses from 810 registered voters in New York State. Rather small sample size, but you kind of get the gist of it. If you've ever talked to anybody from New York, anybody who's lived in New York in the past 10 years, Bobby Bacala himself, Steve Sciarippa, says that Bill de Blasio's about the worst human being ever. Paraphrasing, of course, but the sentiments are the same. So good news, bad news. You poor pricks in New York are probably shit out of luck for the next election cycle. But there's also precedent for change being on the horizon. Follow me a little on this one. So if de Blasio doesn't get recalled or impeached before the end of 2022, he can't run again for mayor, thank Christ. But Andrew Cuomo, being governor, is up for re-election in 2022 in the next set of midterms. He's looking for his fourth consecutive term as New York governor. And for those of you who don't know, Andrew Cuomo actually has a bunch of different hats he puts on his giant head. Not only is he the governor of New York, he's also the chairman of the National Governors Association, which he's also the highest compensated governor in the United States from a financial standpoint. So, what a humble servant to the people this man is. So the next round of midterms, 2022, Cuomo is going to be seeking his fourth term as governor, as I've previously stated. And if you know a thing or two about New York gubernatorial history, it kind of starts to sound a little bit familiar. Are you aware that Andrew's actually not the first person in his family to hold public office? In fact, his father, Mario Cuomo, was governor of New York from 83 until 94, a man who held the office for 3 consecutive terms, and a man who is seeking his fourth term in 94, which was also a midterm as well. Polls at the time had Cuomo far and away ahead because he was in a deep blue state with deep blue roots, deep blue Congress, Senate, you name it, New York was blue, like then and like now as well. Now, something funny happened in 1994, November 8th, the Republican Revolution. Oh, for the first time in 40 years, the Republican Party wins control of both the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate in midterm congressional elections, led by Representative Newt Gingrich of Georgia, who subsequently replaced Democrat Tom Foley of Washington as Speaker of the House. The empowered GOP united under the Contract with America, a 10-point legislative plan to reduce federal taxes, balance the budget, and dismantle social welfare programs established during 6 decades of mostly Democratic rule in Congress. Now, go with me on this one. Doesn't that sound a little bit or a lot bit like what's happening right now? Doesn't it sound like there's a bunch of Democratic mayors and governors and officials that keep pushing really stupid and really pointless social justice programs? Doesn't it sound like these same officials are also raising taxes on people for these stupid programs that don't work and don't serve a vast majority of the population? Now, I'll give you the fact that over the past 40 years, the House and the Senate have flip-flopped back and forth, and there's been times of total Republican control and mixed control, but the Democrats have always seemed to have massive control in different legislative bodies since 94. And one other important point, Cuomo and de Blasio are tearing down New York at a rate that is unprecedented. And while de Blasio's poll numbers look like shit with a side of fuck all, Cuomo's actually polling relatively well considering how poorly he's handled everything, from killing off 6,500 elderly people in old folks' homes from COVID to blaming all of his failures on Trump and rich people leaving New York City based on the policies that you and that idiot Bill de Blasio have enacted. But if you were to go by polling, you'd think that his job should be safe because, he's in a deep blue state with a large deep blue city with deep blue roots at the state, federal, and local level. It's not like something revolutionary hasn't happened before, but maybe I'm just connecting dots that aren't there. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching today. I've been Don Khan-Swaylo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.